Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta ya hayyu ya qayyum taj'alul hazna in shi'ta sahla Allahumma arzuqna niyatin khalisatan liwajhika al-karim lillahi ta'ala. Somebody asked a question before class. The Sheikh answered, initially Umar radiyallaahu anhu, you remember we said that when he was between the two, or they were about to, the two armies faced, and they received a letter from Medina. The letter said that Abu Bakr Siddeeq radiyallaahu anhu had passed away, and that the new caliph was Umar radiyallahu anhu. And he said in the letter, ordering that that Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu anhu would not be a leader. So when he read that, he showed it to the one that he was supposed to be the leader, and then that person said, continue. So why did the Umar radiallahu anhu do that? That was the question. So the Sheikh said, initially Umar radiallahu anhu said what he said because he didn't think that, no, I'm sorry. Cancel the whole thing. Somebody asked about Umar radiallahu anhu. Remember when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, they were wondering, some people got distraught, and Umar radiallahu anhu said statements showing that he would not accept anyone saying that the Prophet had passed away. So somebody asked, why did Umar radiallahu anhu say that? And the Sheikh answered, he thought that he had fainted and that he would die before the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Maryam John, Maryam بگو که صدیام تشنا بس بگوین که محمد از چی کنه به خاطر که یا یک جایی که میشن چی میشن بسیار صدا میکشن. It's okay. Yeah. After the Arabic Peninsula was calm, so we're going back to our story. Remember that the Muslim army was in the area of the Romans, the Bilad al-Shaam, and Abu Bakr Siddeeq was still the caliph. After the Arabic Peninsula was calm, Abu Bakr Siddeeq radiallahu anhu, out of his great knowledge, energy, and intelligence, directed his intention to Bilad al-Sham in Bilad al-Furs. Bilad al-Sham, you know, it's like the countries of Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and some areas around there. And Bilad al-Furs at that time is the area of Iraq. Of course, the Iran and the surrounding areas, much bigger than that areas, including Iraq. They were the Persian Empire, and the Romans controlled the area of Turkey, Constantinople, and the area of Shaam, and up to including the areas in Europe. Many areas in Europe, and of course Rome and Italy and those areas. So those are the two empires at that time. So Abu Bakr Siddeeq, after radiallahu anhu, after everything was calm with the apostates, he directed his attention to the countries that they ruled, Iraq and Asham, which is actually the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. The area of Asham was governed by the Romans, and Iraq was governed by the Persians. He ordered Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu to go to Iraq, and he ordered several leaders to go to different areas in Sham and Iraq. He told Khalid bin Walid radiyallaahu anhu to start with a city called Ubillah. Khalid went towards Iraq and he reached a place called Hira. The people of Hira said, "What do you want?" So he went to an area in Iraq called Hira, and the people started, they started to fear. They asked him, what is it that you want? And he said, "Imma an tuslimu, wa imma an tadfa'u al-jizya, wa illa faqad ataytukum biqawmin harisuna ala al-maut kama tahrisuna ala al-hayat." He said, what means either you embrace Islam or you pay al-jizya. If you don't embrace Islam, then you pay al-jizya, which is a small amount of money. They pay for protection. So the Muslims will be protecting that area, and they would pay that amount of money for protection. Otherwise, I have people with me that are, meaning the companions, companions and those that were with them, to die as martyrs in the battlefield, just as you are keen to stay alive. When they heard that, they were afraid, so they paid the jizya. And this is how Hira was controlled. Khalid radiyallahu anhu noticed that the number of his army shrinked because many people in his army stayed away from their families for a long period of time. So they used to go, many of these people, what did we say? They didn't have any salary. They would just go, and their families would be back in the Jazeera, either Mecca or Medina or in other areas. So he noticed that the army was, Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu anhu, that the army shrinked because they would go back to visit their families. During that time, the soldiers were not paid, but rather they were volunteers. He sent Abu Bakr message asking for help. So remember now, which armies are they facing? You're facing huge armies. So he sent a message to Abu Bakr. So Abu Bakr sent him one person as reinforcement. He asked for reinforcement. Abu Bakr Siddeeq radiyallaahu anhu, he sent one person as reinforcement. So some people told Abu Bakr, saying, he's asking you for reinforcements and you're sending just one person, one man? He replied, an army that contains a person like this will not be defeated. And that person's name was Al-Qaqa. He was a very great companion. He was very brave. He would be asking sometimes to do things that go in places that people would not dare to do. So he sent Al-Qaqa to Khalid bin Walid as reinforcement. Another Muslim leader sent a message asking for reinforcements. Likewise, Abu Bakr sent another great companion, one person, as reinforcement. His name was Abdu ibn Auf radiyallahu anhu. After these are stories that mention, like he's mentioning stories that has a lot of benefit, different things, not just the battle. There's certain things that happen about people staying away from their families, and then religious things that one may learn from this of learning the biography. After that, the first battle took not a skirmish, took place between the Muslims and the Persians. So the first battle, the first real big battle, was between the Persians and the Muslims. The Persians' leaders, his name was Hurmuz. They considered him among the best of their leaders. He was mean to the point that the Arabs used to have a proverb about him. When they wanted to show that someone is very bad, they would say, this person is worse than Hurmuz. So the Arabs in the adjacent areas hated him. He was a leader of the elite army of the Persians. They were famous for their courage and their strength. Some of them used to tie themselves several to each other, so that they wouldn't run away. They would tie each other, meaning that there's no running. We're going to stay. So the Muslims fought them until they controlled the water. So the battle took place, and there's an area that had some water in it, and the Muslims wanted to reach the water. So they continued, the fighting continued until they reached the water. Hurmuz agreed with some of the soldiers that he will ask for a duel before the battle. They would, in the past, the armies would face each other, and they would have a duel, or more than one duel sometimes. And the person that would win, their morale would be raised. So he said, I'm going to ask Khalid for a duel, but he said to his army that if you notice that I'm going to lose, I want you to quickly attack him. And they were hiding in a place nearby. So as soon as they would notice that he's losing, they would jump in. So Khalid agreed. And quickly Khalid started to overcome him, and those people rushed towards him. So Khalid bin Walid didn't pay any attention to them. As they were running towards them, he didn't pay attention. He finished him off, then he turned towards them. And he fought them until the Muslims came and helped him. Sayyidina Khalid radiyallaahu anhu was very brave. After hundreds of years after his death, one Muslim soldier was outside of the town of Homs. That's where he's buried, in Shaam, in Syria, in a city called Homs. His grave is there. A man in that city, something happened to him. Khalid is buried in that town. Suddenly, the Romans attacked that area. All the Muslims retreated inside the wall of the city. This is several hundred years after the death of Khalid radiyallahu anhu. So this man, imagine, he's now between him and the Muslim citadel, or the city. The cities sometimes would have huge walls. They would have huge walls. Sometimes these walls, horses could go on it. In Balkh, I saw these walls that is huge. So you could walk on top of the wall. So they would have a huge wall that would surround the city. So the Muslims went inside these walls. And this man was between him and the city walls is the army of the Romans. He thought, what is he going to do? So he made dua to Allah Ta'ala. He said, "Oh Allah, give me the courage of Khalid." Meaning, give me a courage that is similar to the courage of Khalid radiyallahu anhu. "Oh Allah, give me like the strength and courage of Khalid bin Walid." He said, after I made this dua, immediately all the army in my eye was like mosquitoes or like flies. So he started to attack the army by himself. So he started to go through the army, and he split the army, and he kept fighting until he reached the wall, the door. The Muslims opened the door for him. He grabbed a person with him, and they closed the door. So he was able to reach it, and he took a prisoner with him. Khalid quickly went from this battle to another. He would surprise them where they didn't expect. He attacked them during the day, and he attacked them during the night. And fighting in the night is very difficult, especially during that time. Nowadays, they have lights everywhere. They have binoculars that they can see. In the old days, it was not like that. It was very difficult to fight in the nighttime. And they didn't fight usually at that time. They didn't fight in the nighttime. They would fight in the day. So he would attack them in the night. He would attack them in the day. This is why, um, until they were very disturbed and confused, he took advantage of their situation. Their king died. This is the Persian king. The king died, and they could not find a replacement right away, because that king had killed all of his own relatives, so no one of his relatives would compete with him over rulership. So they couldn't find any replacement in the family. So, so that's why it took them time. The layman Persians threatened their leaders. They said, either you agree amongst each other on putting a ruler, or we're going to get rid of all of you. So then they search until they find one of those relatives. He was hiding somewhere, and then they put him as a leader. They appointed him, he accepted, and then he became the king of the Persians. At that time, Abu Bakr Siddeeq radiyallaahu anhu directed his attention to the area of Shaam. Think about the number of the Arabs in the Arabic Peninsula. So the number of Arabs in the Arabic Peninsula, how many they would be, and how many of them would be able to fight out of that number. The population in the Arabic Peninsula, what would be their population? And out of that, how many would be able to fight? And leave the peninsula. There was and remain there. So you could imagine the number of armies that were sent here and there, meaning the number was not a huge number. They were not big armies. In number, they were few, but they had something else that covered this gap, this disadvantage, and that was piety. Allah Ta'ala gave them victory because of their piety. He sent different armies to different areas of Sham. He did not send one army with one leader, but rather he sent several armies with several leaders. The king of the Romans knew about what was going on, that the Muslims had, armies, small armies here, there. So he gathered a huge army, and every army among the Romans had tens of thousands of soldiers. He sent different armies to the different areas where the Muslims were, and he prepared a big force to attack them. He sent armies wherever the Muslims were, and with him he had a huge army that went towards attacking the Muslims. One of the Muslim leaders sent a message to the other Muslim leaders saying, like this we are separated, and each army does not have a lot of soldiers. So I suggest to you, let's come together and unite all our forces, so we would be close to each other in a way that we could help each other. Like this, we can help each other easily. They all agreed. After the leaders in different areas sent messages to each other, they agreed, and then they sent a message to Abu Bakr Siddeeq radiyallaahu anhu. And Abu Bakr said, this is a good idea, so go ahead and do it. He told them, gather together so you would face your enemies united with all your forces. Know that you are supporting the religion of Allah. Know that if a Muslim army has the amount of soldiers as you, they have the amount of soldiers as you, then such an army would not be defeated due to the lack of numbers, but rather they might be defeated because of sins. So stay away from sinning. The Muslims gathered in one place. So he told them, if the amount of numbers that you have, and we're going to talk about their numbers, they would not be defeated ever because of their lack of numbers, no matter how many the other side has. If they reached a certain number of people and they're pious, then doesn't matter how many the opposite side is. They will not lose because of their numbers, but they may lose due to their sinning. Abu Bakr radiyallaahu anhu sent Khalid a message saying, take half of the army in Iraq and go with them to support your brothers in Sham. So Khalid was in Iraq. He went back towards Sham at that particular time. So he picked 9,000 people from the army that was in Iraq. Among the people that he picked was all of the companions of the Prophet Sallallaahu, alaihi. So he picked all the companions and others. He didn't leave a companion. He said, I'm going to take all of them and I'm going to go to Sham. The leader that was supposed to stay behind with the army, he said, wait a minute. His name was Al-Muthanna ibn Haritha. He said, this is not what Abu Bakr meant. You take all the companions and I seek victory from Allah from them. Meaning, I am hopeful that Allah will give victory to us because these companions are with us, companions of the Prophet ﷺ. You taking all of the companions? He said no. Take half, about half or a little bit more, and leave the rest. So Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu anhu, he accepted. He went quickly to support Sham. So from Iraq, he went towards Sham. The companions did a lot to support the Prophet ﷺ. They spent their lives supporting the religion of Islam. So he took a hard way. This way, there was not enough water to feed 9,000 soldiers to quench their thirst. They didn't have that much water. So he did something. He took a certain number of camels and let them be very thirsty. Then he allowed the camels to drink. And you know the camels will drink till they fill most of their body with water. That's the amazing thing. It actually, the water goes into their parts and fills their body. So he did that. Then on the way they would slaughter one camel. And they would take the water that is from the body, they would give it to their animals to drink. And they would eat the meat and they would continue on their way. So until they reached a place where had one of them knew that they had water, so they dug the ground and then the water came out. So Khalid radiyallahu anhu reached the Muslims much quicker than they expected. They were told reinforcements will come, but they didn't expect it to come so quickly. So this raised their morale. The Muslims did not have one leader, but they had several leaders. Now that they came together, they had several leaders in one army. So all the Romans gathered in front of them, facing them. The Muslims gathered with all their reinforcements, and still their number did not exceed 40,000. So all of the reinforcements that came, the different armies, their numbers did not exceed 40,000. As for the Roman army, they were much bigger. They were about 240,000. So what would be the difference for every person? At that time, it would be hand-to-hand combat. So it would be the difference between one. You had to fight how many? 6 of them. MashaAllah. So the Roman army had about 240,000. And some said more than that. Some said more than that, but some said there were around 240,000. Khalid radiyallahu anhu said, this is not a usual day, he told the army. Not a usual battle. This battle will decide how things will go after it. The next battles that will come after this is going to be the deciding battle, he told the leaders. So I think we should not fight except after having one leader. So I suggest that every leader amongst us would be chosen to lead the whole army for one day. So they would take turns. One would be the leader, and he would be the leader of the whole army for that day. So each of those leaders would be the leader of the whole army for that day. I know that Abu Bakr did not say that, but he does not know the situation that we're facing right now. If he knew, he would tell us to do the same thing I am suggesting. He told them, you think, what would Abu Bakr order you to do in such a case? And let us agree on that. All of them said, what you're suggesting is proper, so go ahead, and then you be the leader for the first day. So they saw that the Romans started to organize. They started to have movements in a way not usual, so they thought that they're ready to attack. So this might be the day that they're going to attack. Khalid said, let's divide into groups. Each group would be 1,000 in number. 1,000 is not a small number. They can defend themselves until help arrives, and it is easy to move 1,000 than to move 10,000 people, for example. At the same time, it will spread our forces in a way that would show our forces much more in number than we are. And this would put fear in the hearts of the enemies. They agreed and implemented it. Those who were in the heart of the army, they were divided 1,000 each, and those who were in the right flank and left flank, the same. So they had the right and the left flanks, and then they had the center, and they were divided all into groups of 1,000. Before the fight began, one of the Roman leaders said, I want to meet Khalid. He left the Roman army and he stood between the two armies in the middle. His name in some of the history books his name was something in Arabic that's similar either to George or Georgia. His name was. He said to Khalid, so Khalid agreed, and he went inside this area between the two armies, and they had a conversation. He asked Khalid, he said, why do people call you Saifullah? Is it because that Allah sent a sword from the sky to your prophet, and then your prophet gave that sword to you, and then you fight with the sword, and that's why you gain victory? And Khalid said, no. He said, I'm called that because this is something that the Prophet ﷺ said about me. So Khalid used the opportunity to tell this person about Islam. During that hard time, he didn't miss this important thing, is to tell him about Allah, that Allah is one. He does not have a partner. He doesn't have a likeness. We don't worship a human being. We don't worship a body. We don't worship a God that people believe that he is like light or like darkness or like the air. But rather we believe Allah is the creator of everything. He's the only one that brings things from non-existence into existence. He created Jesus. Jesus is not God. Jesus was brought into existence. His mother was brought into existence by the Creator. So he mentioned things. He said what Allah willed for him to say to this man, and Allah opened his heart to listen. And he asked Khalid, and what would one do? How would one become a Muslim? So Khalid told him to say the Shahada, and the man said the Shahada and became Muslim. Then he told him, he asked for water. He had him pour water on him, and he did ghusl. Then he taught him how to make wudu. He taught him how to pray. He prayed 2 rakas, and he joined the Muslims, and he died as a martyr in that battle. He joined the Muslims and he fought, and he died in that battle as a martyr. This battle is called the Battle of Yarmouk. This is a very, very famous battle. Books have been written on it. It's the battle that happened with the Muslims against the Romans. Now they might downplay it. They might say this is not really the Romans. They might say this was that area, but that area was controlled by the Romans. And they might say Constantinople was not really the Romans. But it was. Constantinople was the biggest city and greatest army of the Romans that was controlled in the east. They had one in the west and one in the east, and that was the biggest. But as far as the Bilad al-Sham, definitely it was the Roman army, definitely was controlled by them, and they were not weak. They were not weak at that time. They were very strong. They were not like something easy for somebody to come and do what they want with those armies, the Persians and the Romans. This battle called the Battle of Yarmouk. The reason why they call it Yarmouk, because it was a small river that this battle took place near it, and they called it the Battle of Yarmouk. So the Muslims started to recite Surah Al-Anfal, which was their habit. Before battles, they would recite Surah Al-Anfal. Among them were about 1,000 companions, and among them were about 100 of those who attended the Battle of Badr. So they had about 1,000 companions with them, and 100 witnessed the Battle of Badr. They participated in the Battle of Badr with the Prophet alaihi. Then everyone among the leaders of Muslims went to each group to encourage them to raise their morale. They used to say words to encourage them. At that time, a person came with a letter from Al-Medina. Khalid took the letter. He opened it. It said that Abu Bakr Siddeeq radiyallaahu anhu died. And now Umar radiyallaahu anhu became the caliph. So he ordered that in that letter it said that Khalid would not be the leader. Remember, he was the leader for that day. So in this letter he read that the new caliph, which is Umar radiyallaahu anhu, he says that Khalid would not be the leader. Rather, he would be an ordinary soldier. And Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, he would be the leader, and he's one of the Mubashirin. He would be leading all the Muslim armies. Khalid took the letter to Abu Ubaidah, and he told him, look. So Abu Ubaidah read the letter, and they both agreed that they're not going to tell the Muslims, because they didn't want their morale to be lowered. So they said that they agreed, and Abu Ubaidah said, you continue doing as you were in your position with my permission. So Abu Ubaidah said, you go ahead, I give you permission. Because he's now, Abu Ubaidah was the leader. So he said, I give you permission for you to do as we had mentioned before. So he did that. Then the fighting started. The fighting kept going from morning until sunset. During the battle, Khalid noticed something. He found that a gap existed between the Roman infantry, foot soldiers, and the Roman knights on horses. So he quickly made the Muslims fill that gap. And he separated the foot soldiers from the knights, and they were not able to support each other. And they put pressure on the two groups until the knights, they had horses, they ran away. And then they put pressure on the soldiers, and they started to run as well. And some of the Roman army, they got into an area, a cliff, and they could not stop themselves, so they fell over the cliff. And some of them, because they were chained to each other, remember they were chained, that they're saying that they're not going to be running? Well, whoever they were chained to, they both ran, or more in number. This made it even worse, because if one falls and you're chained, then it would drag the other person with them. So these were, this caused several of them to die. Abu Jahl. So Abu Jahl was a fierce enemy of the Prophet ﷺ. He had a son named Ikramah, who also acted in a bad way with the Prophet ﷺ. But then he embraced Islam. But during that time, he used to also harm the Prophet ﷺ. But then he embraced Islam, and he was in this army. In this battle, he said, I always did bad things to the Prophet ﷺ. Insha'Allah, I will do things to get great rewards from Allah. He told the Muslims, who would give me an oath? They would, for example, this would happen. Imagine they would be in a situation in battle. In certain spots in the battle, obviously it's going to be much more difficult to hold than other positions. So they would sometimes, to encourage others, they would say, okay, who would give me a promise that we're going to hold this place? And then some people say, we would do it. And meaning, who would give me a promise? Basically accepting that if either you get killed or you get victory in that place. You don't leave it. You don't run away. You don't retreat. You stay in that position. And part of the battle, you can retreat and then go back. But they would say something like that, there's no retreat if we go and we take this place. So he said something like that. He would say, who would give me a pledge or an oath that they would stay with me in this particular position, even if he was killed? A large group or a group said to him, we will give you that. And they stayed in that place. All of them were killed or injured severely. Ikramah and his son. So this is Ikramah, the son of Abu Jahl, and his grandson of Abu Jahl. So they both died as martyrs in this battle. Even the women who were with the Muslims fought in this battle. They took one round in fighting. Sometimes the Muslims would be attacked. It would be a need for Muslim women to fight. Normally they wouldn't fight, but if they were attacked or something, then it would be a need for them. They would, usually in the old days, the women would come, they would have their tents, they would go and tend after the battle, they would tend to the wounded, give them water, tend to their injuries and the like. Sometimes these women would come under attack. And this had happened, and they also fought, these women. And many Muslims, they displayed great bravery in this battle. After this battle, the Romans could not control Shaam. Remember that Khalid said, this is going to be the deciding battle? Well, it was the case. They tried, but they lost. One area after another, one battle after another. This was a decisive battle in the area of Shaam. And it's a very famous battle, the Battle of Yarmouk. One person before the battle looked at the Roman army. This is before the battle. He said, Khalid bin Walid, he said, Ma akthar ar-Rum. He looked at the number. He said, wow, what a great army, like what a great, big, huge army. He said that to Khalid. And Khalid, radiyallaahu anhu, said to him, I lost my place. He replied, he said, are you trying to scare me by the number of Romans? He said, rather, an army would be big if Allah willed for that army to be victorious. If Allah willed for an army to be defeated, then regardless of its number, it will not be victorious. So during the Battle of Yarmouk, 9 swords were broken in the hand of Khalid. He broke 9 swords. One of the brothers, he told me, he said he had a dream of Khalid bin Walid radiyallaahu anhu. He said, I saw his forearms, and his forearms were huge. He said he broke 9 swords in his hand until he was given a sword from the area of Yemen, a Yemeni sword that was able to withstand. He had an old qalanswa. Another incident happened. He had an old qalanswa and he lost it. An old hat, and he lost it. So he was looking for it. He was looking, spending time looking for somebody. Imagine he's the leader and he's looking for a hat, an old hat. Somebody told him, is this the time to be looking for an old hat? So he said, in this qalanswa, I put a few hairs of the Prophet Sallallaahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam shaved his hair, so I took some of it and put it in this qalanswa. Every time I go to battle and it is with me, I am victorious. So he kept searching for it until he found it. In reality, this is tawassul. He was asking Allah by the Prophet Sallallaahu alaihi wasallam. This is a sahih hadith narrated by Sa'id ibn Mansur and others. So the scholars of hadith explicitly said that this is sahih hadith. So if the scholars of hadith say this is explicit, then why would somebody say no, it's not, and they're not scholars of hadith? So how do the Wahhabis prohibit that? They prohibit doing tawassul and tabarruk by something that is honored, something that is great. Why would they prohibit that? If someone was told, today they made a cream that if your hand is severely burned, you put this cream on it, suddenly you would be cured. You put this cream and you'd be cured. They accept that. They say, wow, technology has advanced. But if you told them that if the Prophet ﷺ touches it, or a pious person, or something that the Prophet, it was the Prophet's, like a hair that was on his blessed face or blessed head, and it touches, it would cure, they object. And this shows their stupidity, because if you accept that Allah puts benefit, creates benefit in something that is chemicals, but you can't accept that Allah Ta'ala would create benefit in the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam or a pious person. So this shows that the person is very weak in thinking. It is possible and it is true that Allah Ta'ala puts benefits in these things. That's why Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu anhu, he said that. He said that I'm given victory because of that. And he said that every time I'm with this, I'm given victory by Allah. He didn't attribute the victory due to his ability. He believed that Allah Ta'ala gives him victory because he had the hair of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, due to his humbleness. But this is what he thought. And this is not shirk. Khalid bin Walid was a Muslim. And he would be the first among the first to stay away from shirk. So they say that this hadith is not, they don't accept it. They think this is shirk and no attention is paid to them. They claim to be Salafi, and they claim to follow the Salaf, the companions. And this is the companions. The companions did tabarruk and did tawassul, and they claim to be Salafi. So in reality, they follow their ill thoughts. Had Khalid radiyallahu anhu been alive, living amongst us, he would declare them as non-Muslims. The one who attributes bodily parts to Allah, he's not a believer. The one who says that Allah has a finger, he's not a believer. The one who says Allah has a foot is not a believer. Even if you say, well, he has a finger not like other fingers, or he has a foot not like other foot, this does not save them. Or they say he has a leg but not like the creation. The fact that you attribute finger, foot, face, bodily parts to Allah, saying afterwards not like the creation, will not save them. So had Khalid been around, this is what he would have said about them. Some of them said, Imam Bukhari, he had certain bad things in his aqidah. Waliyadu billah. The strongest book of hadith after the Quran is the Sahih al-Bukhari. And they said he had some issues with aqidah because in his hadith he has things that shows tabarruk, shows tawassul, and they don't like anything that goes against their belief. They said regarding Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, he benefited the Muslims, they said. Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, he's the great companion. He said he benefited the Muslims a lot. But he was a misguided person, they say. Waliyadu billah. Likewise, they said that about Muhammad al-Fatih, who conquered Constantinople. Today it was called Islambul. Today it's called Istanbul in Turkey. This area, the country of Turkey, was the eastern center of the Roman Empire. The eastern center of the Roman Empire was Constantinople, the area of Turkey. The Muslims conquered that area. Muhammad al-Fatih is the one who conquered it, and the Prophet ﷺ praised him before he came and praised his army. And they said about him, he has some misguidance, they said. We get to the area of question and answer. Some person asked the Shaykh, he said, and the Shaykh answered, the reason why Umar radiyallaahu anhu put Khalid out of his position. Remember that Umar radiyallaahu anhu sent a letter saying Khalid shouldn't be the leader. Why did he do that? Is to make it clear, more clear for the Muslims that Allah will give them victory even if Khalid is not in a leadership position. That the Muslims will gain victory because like I said, if the army has this amount of pious people and they're fighting for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, they will not be defeated. Another question and answer. There was a difference between the way the Arabs fought in the era of ignorance and what was needed after that. During the era of ignorance, they would fight either in a duel, on foot, riding, or they would do like a raid and then retreat. Later that changed. They couldn't fight Romans and the Persians in that same way. So if somebody asked, about the companions, did they get training and these type of things? So the Sheikh said, well, they grew up like that. At that time, everybody would receive training. His father would train him on these things. People would defend their villages and themselves. So everyone grew up like that. His neighbor, his uncle, his tribe, everyone would grow up learning how to fight and defend themselves. And the companions, they also were taught by the Prophet ﷺ. So, another question and answer. Sometimes their family would need them, and they would go back to their families in return. They needed to do that. They needed to go visit their wives and their children. So later our master Umar radiyallaahu anhu asked his daughter, said, if a man was separated from his wife, usually a woman, an ordinary woman, if her husband was separated from him, how long would it be before she would not be able to be patient with the issue of man and woman, like sexual intercourse, for example? It would be that she would, an ordinary woman, how long? And she told him a certain number. Then Umar radiyallahu anhu ordered the leaders that if after 4 months anyone wanted to go visit their relative, their wives, for example, their family, don't prevent them. Although, you know, at that time they were all volunteers, but they would still listen to their leader, and they said don't prevent them if they want to 4 months. Somebody asked about Ali radiyallaahu anhu. Did he participate in this battle? And the Sheikh answered, he said no. Ali radiyallaahu anhu was next to the Caliph, next to Umar radiyallaahu anhu. He was needed there. As for the time of the Prophet alaihi salatu wasalam, you know that these companions, the 4 great companions, they would be with the Prophet alaihi salatu wasalam in battles, wherever the Prophet was, they were. Originally, somebody asked about the ghusl. Remember we said that when that Khalid bin Walid, that person embraced Islam, we told him to make ghusl. Somebody asked about the ghusl. So he said, what is this ghusl? The ghusl originally is sunnah, except if something occurred that made the person be in the state of major ritual impurity, then it would be an obligation. Like, for example, it was a man, he was not a Muslim, he had performed sexual intercourse, then sometime later he became Muslim. When he becomes Muslim, he's obligated to perform a ghusl. If that was not the case, nothing occurred that made in ghusl an obligation. For example, it was a boy, nothing occurred that made ghusl an obligation, then it would not be an obligation, it would be sunnah. That's just an example. Before opening Mecca, Abu Sufyan, somebody asked about the Battle of Mecca. Remember the Prophet ﷺ, they had an army which was the biggest army at that time that the Prophet ﷺ ever had at that time when they first opened, before conquering Mecca. So they had about a certain number, and they put Abu Sufyan in a certain area that he would see all the different people that are coming through on purpose, so that the news would reach the people of Mecca. So before opening Mecca, Abu Sufyan, who had not embraced Islam yet, the Prophet ﷺ told one of the Muslims who held him in a place, like put him in a place where he could see the Muslims. So at that time, the Muslim army had reached a big number. They were about 10,000. And before that, they never reached that number. So Abu Sufyan stood in a way, in a narrow place, and the tribes started to pass. He could see them. A tribe would pass, and he would, and I don't know if it was in this incident, but they would cover their face except their eyes. So he would see them, and they would mention something about their, well, I don't want to get the two stories mixed. Anyhow, he used to see them, and one would pass, another tribe would pass, and so on. He would be told, who is this? And he would say, this is the tribe of such and such. He would say, well, what do I have to do with this tribe? Then another tribe would pass. He would say, who's this? And he'd say, this is the tribe of such and such. Then he would say, well, what do I have to do with this? Until he saw a group of fighters that when he saw them, he said, who are these people? He was very impressed in terms of how they were. And he asked, who are these people? And he was told, This is the Muhajirin and the Ansar. And when he saw them, he said, the likes of these people could never be defeated. I don't know what he saw, but whatever he felt in his heart, that the likes of the people would not be defeated. Radiyallaahu anhum. And that was the case. Allah Ta'ala gave them victory wherever they went. Another question about women. He said sometimes the women had to fight, so they fought when they needed. Another question was put, Khalid radiyallahu anhu, he did not die in the battlefield, although this is what he wanted. He said, there's not a place in my body, there's no place in my body except I have a wound in it. Wound or scar that shows that he was in battle. I think he went over 100 battles. And he said, and here I am, and before this is his deathbed, he said, here I am dying. And he likened it to like an old camel. Meaning he wanted to die in the battlefield to gain the reward, but Allah Ta'ala did not will. So he said something like, may the eyes of the cowards don't get any sleep. So, meaning, what are they running from? If Allah did not will for you to die, you would not die. So don't be a coward, he was saying. Be brave. Whatever Allah willed for you, that's what's going to happen. Another question. The Muslims would be trained to fight individually. His father would train him. The members of his tribe would train him. His uncle, this, that. Because this is something that everyone had to learn at that time. The way many of those people, their villages, their tribes. This is how you lived. You protected your own. Up to nowadays, there's villages like that. They refuse to have government coming and ruling in their area. They have their people, their village. They gather and they protect themselves. The last one, in the Battle of Badr, one man looked at his right. So he looked before the battle. You're standing, and you have people around you. He happened to look towards his right, and he saw a young 15-year-old man. He looked at him. He thought, basically, then he looked to his left. He saw another same age, young, around 15 years old. He was wondering, he was thinking to himself, I wish I had like two strong people next to me. So before the battle, one of them, they were actually two brothers. So one of them said in his ear, which one is Abu Jahl? This is the Battle of Badr. He said, which one is Abu Jahl? He said, what do you want with Abu Jahl? He said, basically, I want to be the one to take care of him. So then he looked to then the person on the left went to his ear. He said, which one is Abu Jahl? So he showed the first one. He said, what do you want with Abu Jahl? He said, I want to be the one to take care of him. So he said that after that he felt that I don't want to have anyone other than these two next to me. radiyallaahu anhum. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad Taha al-Amin.